I'm going to be speaking on the spiritual disciplines series. So we speak on a spiritual discipline once or twice a year. And so I'm going to briefly just introduce spiritual disciplines themselves, and then we'll get into the one for today. So spiritual disciplines are being a really important part of Christian life. For the last 2,000 years, over that time, Christians have claimed that there are some things that we can do, some things that we can practice that help us to grow in our relationship with God. And of course, Christians have also claimed that God is present in all of our lives, that in every part of our day, he is there, and that as we grow in faith, what we want to do is offer every part of our lives in service and worship of God. But that is, at the same time, Christians have also claimed that there are some particular things that we do that have a special role in drawing us nearer to God, growing us in our faith, and allowing us to encounter him. And these are the spiritual disciplines, particular habits through which we nurture our relationship to him. So one way you might want to think of the spiritual disciplines is these are the usual places of encounter with God for Christians. Of course, God can meet you anywhere, at any time in his sovereignty, and sometimes he does, but these are the usual places where he comes to encounter his people. And the other way to think about the disciplines is as things that we can do in order to affect the things that we can't do. Okay? So through the sheer application of my will, I cannot stop being anxious about the future, or get rid of my lustful thoughts, or deal with my anger against the people who have hurt me. If I just try really hard, I don't get very far with that. But what I can do is I can do the spiritual disciplines, and as I engage in those practices over time, that allows God to change in me the things I can't change myself by direct effort. So the spiritual disciplines are the things we can do to allow God to do the things that we can't do. They shape our hearts in that sense. And over recent years, we have, because they're practices that we have to do and learn how to do, we don't do like a series on spiritual disciplines where you get 7 weeks with a different one each week, because to be honest, that gives you no time at all to have a go at the one we preached on before you get whacked with another one next week. So we try and do them once or twice a year, with the encouragement then that after we've preached on them, there's a period of time where you have a go. You try and put them into practice in your life. Say after we preached on hospitality, we did a hospitality month in November, like a couple of years ago or something, and you all were challenged to invite people over. So I think recently we've done confession, and hopefully you've had a chance since then to experiment with confessing to other Christians the reality of our lives. And so the same is true for this week. So we're going to do the spiritual discipline of giving, and it's a two-parter. So part 1 this week, part 2 next week. This week we're mainly going to look at how money forms us, and next week we'll look more specifically on the way that Jesus calls us to engage with money and how that can shape our hearts. So if you're not here next week, then do you catch up? Otherwise, what I've got to say will be somewhat incomplete, and you could be forgiven for thinking, there's all sorts of stuff Tim's missed out. So yeah, this week we'll mainly think about the formational power of money in our lives, and all the spiritual disciplines, all the habits of our lives, whether they're spiritual disciplines or not, all the things that we repeatedly do shape who we are. I mean, one philosopher once said that personal identity is basically repetition through time. The things that we do over and over again determine who we are and who we become. But Jesus seems to indicate that in all of these things, there's nothing more important than money in shaping who we are and who we become. So we're going to read together what he says in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, where he, in three consecutive ways, makes the same point about the formative power of money. So I think I've got the scriptures up on the screen, but if you want to follow along in your own Bibles, we're in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 to 24, where Jesus says this: "Do you not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal? But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, the whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light is darkness, how great the darkness! No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." In this chapter, Jesus has just been speaking about giving to the poor at the start of chapter 6, and he goes on after this to talk about not being worried about what we're going to eat and drink, but to give our possessions. So we're definitely dealing with money and fasting and prayer in chapter 6 as well. And in this section, right in the middle, he gets to the heart of his claim that money shapes us. So 3 claims, we're going to take them 1, then 3, then 2, because for the middle one, about the eye is the lamp, you're going to have to wrestle with a little bit of first century biology to understand what that's all about. So we'll save that one till last, till we're well in the swing of things, okay? So first of all then, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And the main thing we have to pay attention to is the order in which Jesus says these things. He doesn't say, where your heart is, there your money will be. He says it the other way around. He says, where your money is, there your heart will be. And that's really important, because I've had many a conversation over the years with Christians in churches and small groups where at some point the discussion has got down to, well, the important thing really is your heart, isn't it? It's all about your heart and your heart attitude before God. You need to get your heart in the right place, and that's the key thing when it comes to what you do with your money. And on one level, yes, I think we can all agree that the disposition of our hearts is an important thing before God. But Jesus doesn't say that in that order. What Jesus says is that it is important where your heart is, but he says, but your heart will end up in the right place if you do what I tell you to do with your money. I think that's really interesting, really convicting. Jesus doesn't say, look, if you're struggling to be generous and you hoard all your money, then you sit there until your heart's changed and then you can start being generous. He says, if you want to be a generous person, start giving your money away, and that will get your heart where it needs to be. And I think that's symbolized a little bit by our own language when we talk about being invested in something. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I didn't really care about that, but now I'm invested. And we don't always mean money, but it's interesting that's a financial metaphor, isn't it? Because when I am financially invested in something, I do tend to pay quite a lot more attention to what's going on with it. I'll tell you a story about one of my old churches, Trent Vineyard, back in Nottingham, where I went as a student. And when I started going there, I didn't give any money to church. And every January, they did Vision Sunday. And what we called it was Pie Chart Sunday, because on that Sunday, John, the senior pastor, would whack out the pie charts of their income and their expenditure and what they're doing with their money. And, kind of us, I would say passionate, but maybe apathetic kind of late teenage Christians were like, why are we wasting a Sunday doing this? And that's how I used to think, until I started giving. And when I started giving to church, all of a sudden I became very interested in Pie Chart Sunday. What do you mean you've spent 20% of the church budget on this? Where does that money really go? What are we doing about that? It's because my money was now there. I was invested, and my heart followed, and I cared a lot more about Pie Chart Sunday. And of course, this is something of a spiral. As we start to follow Jesus with our money, that then does change our hearts, which does enable us to obey him more fully, which does change us. So it's a virtuous cycle or a vicious one. But Jesus is clear: where your money is, there your heart will follow. Okay, jump into the end of the little passage we read. Now, Jesus goes on to say, you cannot serve two masters, you cannot serve God and money. And this is another interesting thing he says, because really, Jesus could have chosen anything that tempts me to draw my attention away from God. Any temptation. He could have said, you can't serve God and sex. You can't serve God and success. You can't serve God and, name whatever it is that is a potential idol for us. And that would have made sense with any of those things. Tim, you cannot serve God and your own idea of a good life. He could have said all of that. But he picks money. Isn't that interesting that he chooses money in particular? It seems that there's something particularly pernicious about the desire for money that makes it function as an alternative kind of claim on us to the claims of God. I mean, he personifies it. He calls it mammon. You can't serve God and mammon, kind of personifies it as an alternative being, an alternative master. And this same insight we find in other places in the Bible as well. So I'll give you one example from the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 6, where Paul writes this. He writes, "But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content." Note that. We'll come back to that when we start talking about need, that very slippery word of need. "But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. And it's through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs." Any sinful desire is a root of all kinds of evils. But again, it's interesting that Paul particularly picks on money as a root of all kinds of evils. Okay, that leaves the third thing that Jesus said in this passage, which is about the lamp, the eye being the lamp. So that may have struck you as odd. Like, he's talking about money, then he talks about eyes, then he talks about money again. So to understand this, we need to understand first century biology. So you probably all think that we see things because rays of light bounce off objects, go into our eyes. Here's a test of my GCSE biology, but I'm vaguely right, I think, so far. In our eyes, onto our retina. Our retina translates that into electrical signal, sends it to the brain. Brain interprets it and presents to your consciousness the right way up the things that you've seen. Which actually is amazing, isn't it? I mean, there's a sermon in that itself when we really start to think about. But we just take that for granted. Oh, yes, how sight works, easy. In the first century, that is not how they thought that sight works. What they thought is that rather than light bouncing into your eyes, they thought that your eyes emitted a form of light, which is what enabled you to see things. So I can see Josh sitting there because there's something coming from my eye and hitting him. And that's what enables me to see. So the eye, in that sense, is the lamp of the body because it gives light and enables me to see what's out there. Okay, got that? It's actually really quite late that view. I'll go on a tangent. No, we'll stop. You can look that up in your own time. So, Jesus is using this as a metaphor to compare how serious how we perceive and deal with money is. Okay? He's saying you have to see money clearly. You have to get this right. This is as important to the rest of your life as the light of your eyes is to your body. So if the lamp of your eye sees clearly, the rest of your body is full of light. If you see money clearly, then the rest of your life will be full of light. But if you get this wrong, your whole body will be full of darkness. That's the analogy that he's drawing here. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, the whole body will be full of light. Which is that's a stronger thing than anything I'm going to say to you this morning. Is to say that getting money right is as important as the light that your eye gives you to enable you to see. So in all three of those ways then, Jesus presses home the formative influence of money. This will shape you, how you see it, think about it, but most of all, what you do with it will shape who you become. Now, to step down a level in authoritative quotations, I'm going to quote from the management consultant, Peter Drucker. He's not quite on the same level as Jesus, but he has had a significant influence. And he once said this, he said, "You can tell me what you value, but I probably won't believe you. But show me your calendar and your bank statements, and I will tell you what you value." What we do with our money and our time will both reveal and determine what we really care about. I think Peter Drucker's right. I think that you will spend your time on the things you deeply believe are necessary. And you will spend your money on the things that you most believe are important. You might kid yourself about this. You might not be honest with yourself about it, but I think we will do that. I will make time in the end for what I think really matters. And I will spend my money on the things that I think are most important. But that reference, we can kid ourselves. This is part of the problem, isn't it? Is that actually we can all have a very distorted view about money and possessions and the financial part of our lives. And I'd like to prove this to you this morning. And so we've got a few different ways that I think that we distort money, but we're going to have a little start of 10. So please, could you raise your hand if you think that you are overpaid in your job or that your pension is too high? No? Going. Now, that is just statistically unlikely. There's 150 of you in here? Is it likely that not a single one of you is overpaid for your work? On the law of averages, I'd suggest that's not true. But what's even more unlikely is that I've actually, surprisingly enough, I've never met a human being who thinks they're overpaid for their job in all the conversations I've had. And that strikes me as ridiculously unlikely. But that's a little clue for us, isn't it? That's a little clue for us. In fact, the research shows that we tend to compare ourselves to those who are richer and feel poor. Some, actual research has done study of this. This is their conclusion. Our default is to compare ourselves to people who are richer and to feel poor. We tend to think of our neighbours and our friends and family who have more than us when we try and kind of analyse where we're at financially. So part of what we need, if this is a psychological reality, is we need a reality check, don't we? So let me suggest the way you can get one. Here's a website for you, givingwhatwecan.org. Okay, feel free to write it down. That's okay, I don't mind you getting your phones out for this. givingwhatwecan.org. And on this website, it has something called the Global Rich List, which allows you to put in your income and the number of people in your household, and it will then adjust that for cost of living differences in different countries, and will show you where you are in the world in terms of your wealth. It's a really helpful reality check, given our propensity to compare ourselves to rich people. So have a go at that with your own income and household. That would be fun. I'll just give you one now. So if you are just a single person in your household, just one of you, and you are earning the national minimum wage in this country and working full-time, so full-time at the minimum wage, one adult, you're in the top 6% of the world. Pound for pound, in terms of the number of loaves of bread you can, all adjusted for cost of living, top 6%. So get your income into that website, get yourself a reality check. Another reality check, of course, is to look into history. So there's the global reality check, but there's the historical reality check. In the UK, 100 years ago, the average percentage of our income spent on food was between 30 and 40%. So a third of the money you brought home would go on your food. Now, it's 10%. Yeah? 100 years. So there you go. So there's the first way that we distort our view of money. The second way is connected to this, which is that I think that we end up with a really warped definition of what we need. Yeah? What we need. I was struck by this when I read a BBC article about cost of living crisis for a young adult in London. And the young lady who they were interviewing was saying, you know, what terrible condition she's in, and she can't afford the basic necessities of life. She can only afford to eat out once or twice a week rather than 3 or 4 times like her other mates. And I thought, you think, have I missed something? My wife, Jo, used to work for Christians Against Poverty, and she was really struck by this in her time working for Christians Against Poverty. She would regularly go, help people who are in debt and serve them in various ways, but part of that process was helping them to set a budget within which they could meet their necessities, but could also live sustainably financially. She's got many stories, but just one tame one would be that she once spent time with a woman who just lived on her own and was trying to get her to set a food budget, and the woman was insistent that just to meet her basic needs, her food budget had to be twice as high for just her as Jo knew that our food budget was for us with 2 kids. And it's very easy to point the finger in this, isn't it? But you know where I'm going, is that actually it's easy to see it out there, but it's also in here, isn't it? My perception of my needs is unlikely to be entirely clear-sighted. It is likely to be distorted. And we're not helped because our public narrative also shapes this. So we have a poverty line in the UK, but our poverty line is relative, not absolute. So I can't remember exactly, is it set at 40% or something? So that means if we all get more wealthy as a country, our definition of what it is to be poor increases as well. So as a culture, we are redefining what we need just according to how much money we all have, rather than what we actually need. Now, there may be good political reasons to do that. I'm not making a political comment. I'm just noticing that our definition of need is being shaped all the time by things that are not necessarily in touch with, reality. And here's, again, some corporate stats for you. So if you want an indication of how skewed our view of need is as a culture, then let me tell you that the cost of providing clean water globally, so clean water every day for every human in the world, has been estimated at around $140 billion a year. It's also estimated that we spend $85 billion a year on energy drinks, $115 billion a year on plastic surgery, and $2.5 trillion a year on Christmas. So 10% of what we as a culture spend on Christmas every year would solve the problem of clean water for everyone in the world. Okay? So this isn't one big guilt trip. This is just to try and get into us. We may not see money particularly clearly as a culture or as individuals. We may be a little bit distorted in our views. And of course, we buy into consumer myths, don't we? We all have the sense of, when I get this, my life will be better, or I'll feel a bit better. I won't elaborate on that. You know, the main reality check for that is just to reflect on the last 5 purchases you made and think about how long they made you feel better for. Usually a matter of 24 hours before you started thinking about the next one. But another and the last kind of myth distortion that I want to share with you this morning is about giving. Because we tend to tell ourselves, when I have more money, I'll be more generous. When I've got more to give, I will give more. But that's not true. Again, multiple research projects have shown that actually, the richer we get, the less we give as a proportion of our income. So we may give more in absolute terms. If I go from earning 30k to 60k, I may give 200 rather than 150, but as a proportion of my income, I give less as I get richer. And yet, this is what we often tell ourselves, isn't it? When I have more, then I will be generous. Why is it that money can do these things to us? Why is it that it can mess the way we think so badly? Jesus was onto something when he identified money as particularly pernicious temptation for us. And so there's no answers this morning. Next week we'll look at what Jesus has to say, but I want to finish this morning by giving you a few reasons why I think money is such a powerful alternative God for us. And it's all to do with what it promises. Because money promises us security, doesn't it? You know, how many times have you thought to yourself or felt somehow, if I had more in the bank, then I'd feel more secure about this circumstance or the future? Or money gives that promise. It says, you know, have lots of me and then you will be fine, whatever comes. Build bigger barns so that you can put all your crops in it, so that you can have peace in the future. Jesus told a story about that. Do you remember the bigger barns? Do you remember what he said? You fool. Treasure on earth. One of the points Jesus hammers home all the time is treasure on earth is totally insecure. It can be here today and gone tomorrow. And yet, the temptation is it promises us security. The second thing it promises us, I think, is independence. In some ways, I think this is potentially the one that gets its way into me most deeply. If I had more money, I could do more of the things I want to do. I have less obligations to me. I'm freer. I'm independent. I can live the life that I want to live rather than the life that I have to live. These are the lottery winner fantasies, aren't they? If I won the lottery, I can live the life I want to live rather than the life I've been given. Money could make me the king of my life again. Can we see the potential spiritual problem as we walk down this road? There is a Christian version out there on the market as well, which goes a bit like this. I have a real desire to serve the Lord in ways A, B, C, but I can't because I've got to work. So what I'm really praying for is that the Lord would free me from the obligation to work so I could be fully independent to serve the Lord wholeheartedly. I may have considered thoughts like that myself at times, dark moments. But the truth is, if God really needs you to serve him in ways A, B, and C without the restriction of your job, then I don't think it's a cash flow issue for him. He can provide you for more money if he wants to. If he's not doing so, then I think we can conclude it's far more likely that he doesn't see our particular set of circumstances as a barrier to serving him in the way that he wants. Maybe he's far more interested in us serving us where we are. So this promise of independence is pernicious. You know, on the one hand, God holds our life in his hands. On the other hand, we think if we had more money, we would be able to find the life that we want, determine our own path. Finally, it promises pleasure. I won't spend long on this, but this, you know, the things we could have if we had more money, isn't it? You know, holidays, more rest, hobbies, etc. And despite generations and generations of philosophers telling us that the pleasures of the flesh imprison us rather than bring us happiness, and we don't even need the Christian tradition, we just need the thoughtful tradition of the West, we still tend not to believe it. Jim Carrey was quoted, wasn't he? So I wish everyone could be rich and famous, so they discover it's not the answer. And we respond internally by saying, well, it wasn't the answer for him, but maybe I'll do a better job of it than Jim Carrey. I'll have a go. What's it? Money can't buy you happiness, but there's always plenty of volunteers to have a go at that again, isn't there? And the complicated thing is that in all of these things, there's just enough truth to make the lie plausible. And the truth is this, is that material things are really good. Really good. God created the heavens and the earth, and he looked at all it had made, and he said, it's good. It's good to have material things, the things that money can provide us with. We were in fact designed as God creatures to enjoy his creation. When we have an expensive but delicious meal out and we enjoy it, we are participating in the goodness of creation. And we can offer that back to God in worship. This is true. But the problem is that truth is lost and distorted by our sin. There's millions and millions and millions of people who live in destitution that do not have access to the good things of God's creation that would allow them to flourish. So there's this huge imbalance, isn't there? Yes, material things are good, but there's a massive imbalance between who's enjoying them and who's not enjoying them. And most of that is, again, I won't get into politics, but of course most of that is caused by selfish human actions, isn't it? So I would argue that all of these distortions, all of these lies come out of distortions of that thing that's actually true. This is why poverty is a bad thing. If material things weren't good, it'd be no problem to be poor, would it? And Jesus wouldn't have spent lots of time telling people to give to the poor. The only reason poverty is bad is because enjoying God's material creation is good. And so, if that's the truth that underlines the lie, here's the big lie. Here's the big lie that creates all our problems and that we're going to have to deal with if we want to embrace the spiritual gift of giving. The big lie is this, that I am the owner of the money and the possessions and the income and the assets that I have. They are mine, and they are mine to deal with as I want. That is a very normal thing to think in our culture, in every culture. But it is a lie. And it is the big lie that creates all our problems. God's good creation is not something that belongs to him, of which I'm a steward. There's bits of it that belong to me, of which I am an owner. So, I'm going to leave you with that thought, because we're going to pick that up next week as we start to think more then about what Jesus instructs us to do with our money, but not just what does he tell us to do, but in what ways does he trying to reshape us through the ways he teaches us to use money? What is it he wants to change in us, in our hearts and our lives? So next week we'll come to all of that. For this week, I want to finish by giving you 2 challenges. Now, we all know about challenges the preacher gives you. You sit there and you nod and you go, and you go out there, you do nothing about it, and next Sunday you'll come back and say, oh yeah, do you remember Tim said? Okay, I'm challenging you to do something with the challenges. I'm really challenging you to actually do this week, okay? So take me seriously. I really encourage you to have a go. Here are the 2 challenges for you. First one, go home, do a proper analysis on where your money goes. Look at 3 months of bank statements, 3 months of bank statements and actually write down what you're spending where. Like, make categories, you know. If you like these sort of things, get on a spreadsheet, get really into this, color codes, bills, mortgage, food, and try and break it down. How much do you spend on the different bits of your life? Where does your money actually go over a 3-month period? Okay, that's your first challenge. The second challenge is this. Here's the bit where I have to really implore you to do this. Second challenge is share it with someone else. Share it with someone. We have this thing in our culture that money is somehow an area of life that no one else should get a look in. Now, it is personal. There's lots of personal areas of life, areas that we don't share with all and sundry because they're personal. But in normal Christian discipleship, there are always a couple of people that we invite into our lives for accountability, for encouragement, for someone to, knowing that my mind can get very distorted, I get a Christian brother or sister or two, and I bring them into my life and say, look, you know you love me, help me to see this clearly. Reflect back to me what you see. Tell me where I'm deceiving myself. We're prepared to do that in lots of areas of life, but I don't know why money becomes one of these things where we don't do that, even in the church. So my challenge to you is break that mold. Find one person, or if you're a married couple, it doesn't count showing each other. Hopefully you're doing that anyway. I need to find someone else outside the home. I saw you catch my eye. It's no easy out there. Show someone else. And what that does is I guess what I'm asking you to do is to prepare your hearts for next week, because the heart does matter. And by making a concrete action, your heart will follow. And as you concretely show this to someone else, I hope and I pray that what you're really saying to Jesus is, Lord, I'm opening up this area of my life, and I want to follow you in it, and I want you to change me, and I'm willing to do a concrete, vulnerable thing to put me in a place where I am more able to escape the distortions of my own mind and learn to follow you. That's my hope, okay? So there you go. There's your 2 challenges. I'm going to pray for us as we're going to finish. Then we're not going to have a worship song or anything like that. Me and Linda are happy to pray for anyone who's come today wanting prayer. We'll pray for you at the end. But we wanted to send you out this morning with the last thing you've heard being, look at your money, tell someone about it, okay? So Jesus, we ask for the help of your Holy Spirit, because if you're right, Jesus, if you are right, then this is one of the areas of our lives that we are going to find it hardest to follow you. We are going to find it so difficult to let you be king of our lives rather than money. Even as Christians who've followed you for years, we're going to be tempted to come back under the dominion of mammon rather than Jesus. And we acknowledge to you our failings and faults in this area. Some we will know, but others we just won't even be aware of because we're so distorted in the way we think about these things. So we pray for your help. We thank you that your invitation is not one of judgment and condemnation, but it's your ongoing campaign to set us free, to make us like you, to give us all the life and beauty and goodness that we can pack into our years before the resurrection. So give us courage, give us memory, bring to mind people, a person that we can trust enough to say, hey, will you do this thing Tim talked about with me? And we pray that you would prepare us this week for next week when we really listen to what you say about how you want us to use our money and the disciplines you want to create in our lives. In your mercy, Lord, help us, we pray. Amen.